Todd's been a vital part of the California School of Abstraction. He was awarded just over a year ago with the Pollak Prize for Creativity by the Pollak Foundation. And I believe that was the second or third time they've awarded that prize. And the $50,000 award from the Pollak was directed towards Todd's exhibition called Processional, which was a solo installation at last year's Venice Biennale, which was a success. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. This was in partnership with the Max Center for Art and Architecture, curated by the Mac's very own Priscilla Fraser. And Processional was presented at the Chiesa de Santa Maria della Pieta, located just a few meters away from St. Mark's Square and right before the entrance to the Arsenale. Very good location on the Grand Canal. So Todd has exhibited extensively both in the United States and abroad, including the Palm Springs Art Museum, Gallery Stencil, Villa di Donato, and MoCA here in LA. He's currently in several museums as we speak, and he has been awarded 2 ArtSlant Showcase Awards, the Curator's Choice Award from the Micro Museum, and the Artistic Merit Award from the City of Naples. So without any further delay, welcome Todd, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi everybody, thanks for being here.
So let's start off with the Pollak Prize, Todd. It was such a wonderful award and a wonderful surprise last year to wake up and see all the newsletters and the art world on fire with your winning of this prize for creativity, just the second or third time that they've done this.
Yeah, the other 2 are Gideon Mendel was the first one, and the second one was Amy Sherald. And Amy Sherald has the one that she's the artist that did Michelle Obama's portrait.
Wow.
She's really blown up since she won this prize. And they don't do it annually. It's kind of given on
merit.
When they want to do it, the Pollak people give this particular prize. So that's why there are so few artists that have won it.
Well, it's a remarkable achievement, and once again, congratulations. I know when I heard last year, I was so happy for you, and it was a wonderful award that helped pave the way for Processional last year in Venice. And for those of you,
Foundation, none of that would have happened. They really were very instrumental, and they were amazing to work with.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. Between the support all the way around, it was a fantastic experience. So this was the signage that you made last year for Processional. That was a nice size, to say the least, larger than life. And the backdrop is one of the paintings that we'll discuss shortly. For those of you who weren't able to attend last year's Biennale, we're on the Grand Canal here, and I don't know if you can see my arrow, but this is the cathedral, and right next door is the chapel where Todd was. And this chapel is also affectionately known as Vivaldi's Chapel.
Yeah, the acoustics inside the chapel were amazing. It was a strange space. It was only 15 feet wide, but it was 90 feet long. There was a small vestibule as you walked in, so that was where we used to start the processional. And it was a wonderful space to have the music. The music was set up to where it was, all the speakers were in the very back of the chapel, so it was to bring you forward into and walk through the space. The idea was that you did a processional from the beginning of the exhibition and out the back door, because through the back you would go into a small courtyard, and there was the Zimbabwe pavilion and the Andorran pavilion behind the church.
So we're looking at a photo of the entrance in the vestibule of the chapel, and the way you had installed the exhibition, I thought was brilliant. And maybe you want to go into and discuss the processional exhibition. and the life stages that you go through as you're walking through. And as you just alluded to, Greg Walters did a phenomenal composition that was playing in the background that elicited a lot of emotions as you went through, interacting with the paintings as well as as you said, the brilliant acoustics and the architecture. So if you want to spend a few minutes, Todd, and just discuss that.
Well, the paintings, the painting on the right, the white one, was the first piece that we put together when Greg and I started the project, and it was called Nocturne. And what I had asked him to do at that point was to create a piece of music around a Chopin Nocturne, and then make it his own. And Greg developed three movements within the music. One was a fugue, one was kind of a nocturne sound, and the other was this beautiful, beautiful rolling music that kind of ended the piece. And each of the paintings, the idea was that the music would mimic everything that we were talking about in the paintings as well. And this is a view from the back of the church forward, so it's from the altar forward. So you can see how long and narrow the space was, with high ceilings and very hard surfaces. So each of the pieces, the paintings were, the show was developed around the idea of social media influencers and thought provokers. So each painting was a representation of a particular person, and we used color to discuss who they were emotionally, or characteristics about their personalities. And then across from each of their paintings, there was a small plaque, which was a quote from each of these people, written in Latin, which was part of Priscilla's idea to go along with the church. And the church is from the early 1700s. I don't remember the exact date it was built, but it was a very famous architect, and it was Vivaldi's chapel. In fact, the orphanage was located as part of this church as well.
Incredible. Incredible. And also in this photo, I'm noticing that you're having a performance going on at that time. And that's one thing that I do know that you and Greg were very adamant about, were having live performances throughout the exhibition. I know we had quite a lot during the opening week, but opening week was early May, and the show ran through the end of November. So, so I do know that you did have visiting artists and musicians coming in and performing as part of the exhibition. So, and once again, the acoustics, I just can't say enough about the acoustics in this chapel. It was, you had a very small speaker, and yet everyone heard the music outside on the Grand Canal.
Right. Well, what we did was we wanted everything to be very casual, and we wanted it to feel more like almost like a street festival in some ways, where there were no scheduled performances other than for the opening week. And then after that, Greg and I would just show up, and if there were a decent crowd, which could have been 10 people or could have been 100, we would do, or Greg would do a performance of the music live. And then we had, the music was recorded by the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, their faculty and students. We used student faculty musicians to record the piece. And then we had the lead violinist, who is from Serbia, come for the second week of the Biennale, and she stayed, and she would do live performances in the space. And then we had a Russian opera singer who came, and she would do some impromptu. We had an orchestra from Colorado State University. We had a high school orchestra from Sweden that came. And then we'd have various street performers from Venice that would come in and just do just a small song or something, because the acoustics were amazing. It was a lot of fun. And a lot of these videos are on my website or on my Facebook page.
I remember in the opening week, we, one of the early days, I think it was a tenor from Rome had popped in, and he and Greg were going at it, singing Nessun Dorma, and it was just incredible. It was a very, I mean, I'm not a very emotional person, but I had tears in my eyes. That's how beautiful the sound was, and coupled with viewing these paintings here for as an example, because these were opposite the piano. It was just a beautiful event. So let me go to this
We were
photo
very
here.
lucky too because Dexabel loaned us a grand piano. Dexabel is the equivalent of, they're the English or the European version of Roland. They do all concert pianos. Everything you see in any concert is usually a Roland piano. They also own tamburi drums and all these stage production things. And they gave us an amazing grand piano for the space. And then we had Orb Audio gave us the speakers, which are here behind this painting. They're two very small little speakers about that big, and they produced a great amount of sound. And we also had a subwoofer hidden all behind the altar.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the largest painting you had in the exhibition. It's roughly 8 feet tall, I believe you said, right?
Yeah, it was 8 feet by 6 feet.
So it really had command of the altar brilliantly. And as you walked in from the outside in, you couldn't help but see this. It was just a wonderful painting. And so these paintings, Todd, were all made in your studio here in West Hollywood. For the since I know you very well, let's spend a few minutes to talk about the materials you work with and how you produce the work, so the audience can get more familiar with the work.
Most of the works are done on a heavy canvas, but this particular one and the two in the entry were all on a Belgian linen. And the way I wanted the pieces to be still my work and my style, but I wanted to move the style forward in talking about the different people, the social media people that we were discussing. So this particular piece was called Culmination, and it was the last piece in the exhibition. And the idea of this piece was that through all the other paintings, so you start with Pope Francis was one, Alexander Ocasio, the senator from New York was one, then Elon Musk, Oprah, Donald Trump, Kylie Jenner. So as you went through all of these, this piece was supposed to, that's why it's called Culmination. It was supposed to be the end of all of this. And the idea of at the end of your life, this was the projection that you see of who you have been. Because each of the pieces, the imagery in the piece is of a sword hilt. So the idea was, we're discussing their life. This is the life that they've put forward. This is the sword they put in the sand of their life. And it's like Clifford Still always says, the center line up the middle of a lot of my work is about a life force. It's how we typically see in a painting. If you see a slash like this, we automatically assume it's some type of life force. Whereas if it's a horizontal line, we see it more as a pastoral setting or a landscape type painting. So that was the idea behind most of these paintings. And I removed my typical lines that I use in the works, the 3-inch parallel lines. A lot of these did not have them, or they had one or two, just used it for emphasis on different parts of the project, but not all over the paintings like I had done in the past.
Yes, no, I agree. And then going over to this is, I think, at the official opening, and there was probably, I think, a few hundred people in the chapel. Most of them were behind me, and this was just such a wonderful opening, in my opinion, because everyone who came in was touched. And Priscilla Frazier, the executive director of the MAC, is standing next to you on the left, with reporters and journalists, and some of your friends are visible here in the shot as well too. But going back to the lines, you can see the painting behind Priscilla. The lines are more pronounced. So as you just said, as you walked into the chapel, you started losing a lot of that, the structure, and was more deconstructed as you got towards the end, where it was obviously more emotional, as opposed in the front everything was very structured and very ordered, and everything. So unfortunately, I don't have a snippet of Greg's composition to play in the background, but I think it was a brilliant exhibition. So, and as you said, you have a lot of the videos of the performances. um, as well as close-ups of the paintings on your site, as well as on social media, as do I on my Instagram site as well too. So so
We had we the I had a we have an attendant that took care of everything through the whole run, and the show was we had just under 100,000 visitors through the exhibition over the course of the exhibition, and then we also had 4 or 5 different international magazines that listed us as one of the top 10 exhibitions. Forbes, Domus Magazine, Wide Walls, Venice Insider, all listed this as one of the top 10. And we, this is Venice Insider. And then we were called out with, like in this one, with Helen Frankenthaler and George Baselet's exhibition, as well as Afrocobra, which was Kavi Gupta's out of Chicago, and I can't remember who the other ones were, but these are all also on my website under press, and so you can see the links and the write-ups.
and you've mentioned just a few. I mean, last year's Biennale was absolutely astounding in terms of the museum shows and everything else going on, and to be in the top 12, top 10, top 5 consistently is no easy achievement. When you're comparing yourself to the Gorky exhibition, which hadn't been done in ages, the Boselitz, the Scully, everything else that was happening, it really, my hat goes off to you once again for getting all these coups, as you did last year. I have a question here from Catalina. How did you choose the influencers? Were they all people you admire, or did you just mix it up? And she also suggests it would be fun to create a Judgment Day work.
Yes, that's a great idea. The influencers were chosen by myself, Greg, and Priscilla. Actually, we all discussed who were the top social media influencers and who because the original title was going to be Modern Day Apostles. So it was the idea of these people that are leading the world now, good or bad. And we weren't trying to make a judgment as to whether they were good or bad, but just ask the question, have you realized how much power like Kylie Jenner has? Kylie Jenner has, I think, 300 million social media followers. So she has the power to destroy a company with a tweet. Or Elon Musk, who has the power, he's trying to take us to space. So everybody in there was they had great power. Oprah can create a million-selling author with, a simple statement. Wow, this is a good book. And then Donald Trump. We discussed because he has the power to start a war with a tweet if he so wants. So everybody in here was of that caliber of social media following. And the one that was the least, but still had a lot of followers, was Alexandra Ocasio. We chose her because she does have a huge social media following, but she also is a new voice that we don't know what she's going to be. So even the painting for her, we used lots of whites and greens to represent freshness and newness, but also kind of a blank canvas, because we're still seeing who she will become going forward. So that's how we chose the people. And it was interesting. There were a few others that we did not send. And like the paintings, there were only 7 that were exhibited in the Venice show. And that there were 2 or 3 others that I left here because we didn't need them. And we had chosen what we wanted to show before we shipped.
Yeah. And I want to just mention one more thing is I do have all the paintings from this exhibition. They're on my ArtNet site. So feel free to go to ArtNet and type in Todd Williamson, and you'll be directed to Processional, and you'll be able to see all these paintings up front and close on ArtNet. So let's move now, Todd, towards the works that you've made for the COVID-19 relief fundraiser that we're working on together. These are two pieces that I absolutely love. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Todd's work, unfortunately, white doesn't transfer very well on a JPEG. But I've had the privilege of seeing many of these white paintings installed in collectors' homes, and whether you see it in the morning, in the afternoon, or the evening, the colors are all changing. The undertones come out, or they get buried, depending as far as how it interacts with the light. And it goes back to the artists that influence you as well too, um, and and the abstractions especially. So if you want to talk about these, that would be fantastic.
This pair, they're two separate paintings, but they were painted to work together. They're an 18 by 18 size. They're very hazy. They were done right at the beginning of the lockdown, lack of a better word. And for me as an artist, what I've been doing, I'm in my studio by myself every day anyway. So for the most part, my day-to-day has not changed, but it's changed a great deal in other ways. So what I've been doing is really doing a lot of research into the people that influence me, like Frankenthaler and Clifford Still and Mark Rothko, and really getting into their techniques of how they mix their paints and what kind of paints they used, and then getting more into their philosophy of why they did it. Especially like Clifford Still. I'm somewhat mesmerized by Clifford Still as an artist because he didn't sell that much during his lifetime. He was a professor and taught art at I can't remember which college I can't remember which college he taught at, but for the most part, Clifford Still kept all of his paintings and rolled them up and kept them in storage until at the end of his life, with the intention that everything would go to one museum, and which now is the Clifford Still Museum in Denver. So I've been using this time to really do a lot of research on these artists that influence me so much, because I also feel like the art world has been in a state of bigger is better and harsh, and beauty was out. The art world didn't want to see anything beautiful. In fact, it was looked down upon, or it was, it was given less importance if it was in any way beautiful. And I think that's changing. I thought it was changing before this happened, but now I think it will definitely change. People, I think, now want to see something that they can connect to, that they can be a part of. It's not a giant installation anymore of ugly, harsh, blah, blah, blah. It's about beauty and connecting one-on-one with something that's right in front of you. So this whole group of all of the paintings that I've been working on have been with that in mind as I was doing them.
No, and I agree with you on that. I think I do see a lot of Clifford Still. I do see other artists in there as well too. This painting, Unstoppable, is, I'm not a fan of red so much, but this one for me is just a brilliant painting. There's so much being said in here, and and there's no lines in here at all. So you've completely gone away from, as you said earlier, your lines, and now you're creating a whole new body of work. What inspired you to paint this painting? What was going on in your mind as you painted this? It's a very strong painting.
Well, this too was only done. I think I finished this a month ago. So this was started and completed right at the beginning of the lockdown. And this piece is on linen, and it's on a heavier linen, so it absorbs the paint a little bit differently. The way I started this piece, I wanted to really saturate the canvas with very, very, very thin paints and try and develop layers and layers of color. So then the light from the preceding layers comes out as the lighting changes on the piece itself. So, I typically start with one thing in mind and then allow it to move and grow as I'm working on the piece, because it's rare that a piece finishes the same way I envisioned it when I started. Because I think, a lot of times even a mistake or a drip can suddenly become a wonderful part of the painting if you allow it to be what it's supposed to be. And I think in abstract, a lot of chance exists in creating the work, and you have to allow that to happen. And that's part of the reason that I am not doing the lines at this moment. I'm not doing them, but I'm allowing myself to leave them off, because they, to me, the lines had started to exert a control over my work. They limited me a little bit, and now this allows me just to paint, just to put all the color on there and to saturate it in any way that I want to. So
No, no, it's. I mean, I haven't seen you since the lockdown, so I'm really eager to see these paintings in person. I mean, they come across so brilliantly on these images that I'm sure they really pop when you see them in person. Now, this is a work that's on paper, I believe, right?
yeah, this is a small paperwork. I did a whole series of flags, um, and this wasn't specifically about the United States, but right before all of this happened, I had gotten a commission to do an abstract flag for a collector in Germany. So as this COVID thing got more and more intense, you could see nationalism really becoming fervent around the world, no matter where you were. So I did a whole series of these just to in this one in particular, there's a couple of them that are just blue and there's a couple that are just red. And it was really to discuss the political sides that were starting to show their faces through this crisis, because for me, this was never anything about politics, but suddenly it started being made about politics. And these pieces were kind of just to point that out in a very subtle way. So there's nothing in this piece except ultramarine and white. And so it's all tonalities of color and shading.
Now, you're currently in a show right now at the MAC in Germany. This is a photo taken at the opening, and you're with the founder of the museum, who's in the middle. I don't remember her name, and I can't pronounce names very well, especially German ones. And then the curator is next to her on the left. And this is really so the museum was taken over by yourself and Laddie John Dill, and you're exhibiting in separate galleries, except in the first gallery as you enter. That's the only room that you're basically showing your work side by side. And the MAC Museum stands for Museum of Art and Cars, as opposed to the MAC Center, which is MAK. So your painting here is on the left, and Laddie has the painting in the center and to the right. And in front of that is a beautiful DeLorean. So talk about this museum a little bit, and how you came about, pairing up the cars with your works. Was that something you thought out in advance? Did you have a request list that you wanted certain cars paired with your works, or did it just happen by chance?
Well, the museum, Gabriella is the owner. She was the woman in the previous photo. She and her husband have one of the most important car collections in Germany. And they built this museum. This one is a large 2-story building, and you can see all the walls are curved. And the building was designed to mimic the mountain that's behind the museum. And recently they've built a larger five-story museum that is really it's really more for housing cars and doing big car exhibitions because the space is so vast. But in this particular room, the way this works is we curated the art, and then the car curator would come in and we would discuss what we were doing. Laddie and I did 2 separate solo shows, but it was under one title, which was California Abstract. So even though if you go to the museum, it shows California Abstract, it's 2 separate solo exhibitions. And then this was the entrance to the museum. And in this room, it was a mix of my work and Laddie's. And then because of Laddie's work on metal, all the cars in this room were stainless steel. So there's a Jag from the 30s that's all hand polished stainless steel. There's a German convertible that's all stainless steel, and then this. And then you go into the museum, and on the left is one of Laddie's installation pieces with the lightworks, and on the right is my installation with the cars and the stuff, and then everything else is upstairs in various rooms throughout the museum.
Beautiful. So I'm going to go over to this room here, which is part of your solo exhibition. And I just, as you said earlier, the museum, I mean, it's unusual in that you don't really have straight walls. There are a lot of curvatures, a lot of a lot of interesting angles. And I love how this room is installed with a large painting on that curvature there, creating the shadow effect. And and just so the viewers know, these paintings are of the same size and scale as the works in Venice. So that's how tall this room is. It kind of dwarfs everything on the walls. So I want to spend a few minutes, Todd, and talk about these works because these works were created after the Venice works were. So you're still in the same. Um,
Well, with this particular, the museum had wanted Venice to come, the Venice exhibition to travel to the museum, but they needed the show to open in October because that was when their time slot was. And Venice didn't come down until late November. So basically, I had to recreate the idea behind the exhibition in Venice. So some of these pieces all of the smaller pieces are new works. And then the big piece in the back is an older work that I used because it still has that vertical slash through it, the three slashes. And so I used these two are the idea of the sword hilt. You can see them, especially in this gray piece in the front. So in this exhibition, what I did was take the idea of people that were very influential or within the car culture. And then instead of using quotes from these people there, I used European license plates, and some of these license plates have sold at auction in the past few years for tens of millions of dollars. So the idea was to create a conversation around why a license plate, which typically costs somewhere between $50 and $250, is now worth 15, 16, 17 million dollars. And so then I discussed the people that were doing this, and they're major heads of industry. There are several Middle Eastern sheiks that own these plates. There's a huge designer. There's a couple of celebrities. So as we go on through, I'll point out some of those. Like in this particular room, the centerpiece is called James Dean, and I used him to represent the idea of celebrity. And celebrities are always big car collectors and have a lot to say about everything going on in the world. So this particular piece you can't see from this photo, but it's an oxide with oil, and the oxide has mica chips in it, so it has a little bit of a glitter to it, which for me kind of brought out the idea of the celebrity. And then the two pieces on the right, one is called The Wanderer and one is called The Designer. And there was a major designer who he designs many things, but one of his things is car parts and things like that. And his company is one of the largest in Europe. And he is the one that has the most expensive license plate right now, which is F1. And I think he paid $10 million for it 5 or 6 years ago, and it's now on the market for 17 million pounds. Sorry. So that was where in this room. And then with the cars, the museum went to they're all part of a big car club as well as being collectors themselves. And with certain things, they asked other people in the car club if they would donate automobiles for this exhibition. So we had the Skoda came from a collector in northern Germany who literally trucked it down, and it arrived at the exhibition at 4:45 in the afternoon, and we had a press conference at 5. So we were rolling it into the exhibition space, and you can tell by the lighting it has not been adjusted because we literally got everything on the walls and moved in just as we opened the doors to start the press conference.
Interesting.
So
Wow.
stuff came later.
Yeah. No, I love this car the most. This classic Jaguar. And I don't know how you got the keys to sit inside the car, but I'm glad you did.
That was my request to the curator, who thought it was very funny. He asked me. We had a really great time. They were amazing to work with. And at the end of the exhibition, which was very successful, he said, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And I said, "Yeah, I want to sit in all the cars and take photos." And he's like, "Oh." So he actually took this photo. And this is an HK uh, 140, I believe. It's from like 1938. It's all stainless steel. The body is hand rubbed stainless steel, and then behind the car, you can't really see too well in this photo, but that's one of Laddie's light pieces. There are two slits of light that go up, and that mimic the grill at the front of the Jaguar.
Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about your other current museum show right now, called the Circle of Truth. This I know took over 10 years in the works to come to life. It opened last year up in Los Gatos in Northern California. Then it came down here to MOA at in Lancaster, and it currently is down. I think it's off to Hawaii, you said, and then back to California, then Arizona. So your painting is here on the right, and there's 48 other works that are part of this exhibition.
Well, this exhibition was curated and put together by Shane Buffog and Laura Hipke, and it took over 9 years to create, because the way it worked was Shane created the first work, and then once the piece was dry, they shipped the painting and a blank canvas, all the same size, to the next artist. And that artist was told to take the painting and create the truth of what that painting is for this exhibition, and then you create your work from the truth that you derive from that painting. So each piece went that way. So you can imagine it changed throughout the whole series of paintings. And it started with Ed and went through all these different people: Lita Albuquerque, Charles Arnaldi, Lisa Bartilson, and ended with Ed Ruscha. So like in this particular photo, the white painting in the center with the dot is Billy Al Bankston. And it is literally just an off-white painting with a white dot. And then his painting went to, the red piece is Christopher Munger's. And Christopher my understanding is that Christopher did not really know what to do with the white dots. So he created this heavy gestural painting in reds and purples that is there, which is what I received. And to me, the gestural work is always about chaos and anger, usually, is how I see them. So this is what was given to me. And it was hard for me to decide what the truth was coming from this painting, other than the fact that I felt that Christopher was probably not happy with what he had been given. So I created my work just based on the truth of what I felt in having this work, and in how you create truth in an exhibition. So that's why my work is all these vertical slashes and the dark indigo blues and titaniums. But the exhibition goes on through, and the last two works, number 48 was Lisa Bartilson. And Lisa at the time was doing something with a women's rights organization. And for her, the truth in this came out as she took a T-shirt that had had writing on it about, I can't remember what the writing was, but the writing was all about this women's rights movement. And so she posted it pasted it rather to the canvas, and then this was given to Ed Ruscha. So Ed had to figure out what he was doing with a T-shirt covering a canvas with a bunch of writing on it. And Ed, here, this is actually the photo. This is the catalog from the exhibition, but Ed ended up taking one word from the T-shirt and creating his work, which says "N." And so he came a long way from going, and this is Lisa's T-shirt, if you can see that.
Yes, I can. Interesting.
It was a really interesting exhibition, and it started at the New Museum in Los Gatos, and then it went to the Museum of Art and History in Lancaster. My understanding is that now it's going to the Honolulu Contemporary Art Museum, and then there's the Arizona Winslow Contemporary Art Museum, and several other places. Shane has this set up to travel quite a bit, so it's a great exhibition. Really, really curated beautifully.
No, that's wonderful. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting how you go full circle, going from all these different um, canvases, and as you said, all you see is the previous one. You don't see what was done prior to that one, and you've got to be inspired by that to create your canvas. And how Ed came up with a simple two-letter word at the end really is a nice bow on top of the thing. So I have a question that just came in from Anonymous. What materials do you work with, Todd?
I work almost exclusively in oils, but the base of my canvas I build up. I spend more time usually creating the base and what I paint on than I actually do painting. So I build up on the layers of gesso, and then I do layers of acrylic. Usually is what my base coat is, and I almost always use colored acrylic to paint on, because I feel that you always get some of the light through the layers of oil in the finished canvas, and I think it gives a little bit more depth and movement to it. And I like to work on heavy canvas, like a size 10 duck, or maybe a size 12 duck. But recently I'm doing a lot of stuff on linen. It's very different because it's so porous, but that's pretty much it. I don't experiment a whole lot, or if I do, it never leaves my studio.
And speaking of linen, I mean, are you having a hard time getting supplies during this age of coronavirus? Because I do know, talking to a lot of people, they're having a hard time trying to get basics. So how about you? Are you in that same boat as well too, or?
Well, I keep a lot of supplies in my studio, but yes, because I typically order stuff through Amazon, all of my materials, and Amazon, the shipping dates, there's no Prime, so everything was taking anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to get here. So I just received a huge shipment of canvas on Thursday. So yeah, I'm having a hard time.
Okay, I got a question in from Roz. You seem really busy. Has the pandemic sidelined your activities?
It has sidelined all of my exhibitions, which have been postponed. I have a show opening in New York. It's supposed to have opened April 2nd. It's now opening in the fall. There were 3 or 4 exhibitions happening in Germany, including a small museum show, and they have all been postponed to sometime in the summer. Right now, none of the dates have actually been worked out, because I think everybody's waiting to see how each country is going to open back up. But for me personally, I think I've been more busy because I've used my studio to keep me very busy. I would go crazy sitting in my house. So I've been in my studio every day and painting and creating and working and really experimenting, taking this time to just let things happen and come out, because I think this is an amazing time to be alive as an artist. I mean, you don't get to live through history often and respond to it, and especially with contemporary art, not many times in history where you have so much going on at one time that affects so many people.
How is that affecting your practice, though? Are you seeing a different output now as a result of all the outside, um, um, distractions that are happening? In this age of coronavirus, how is that affecting your practice?
I think that the art world. I was taught many years ago. There was a program that an artist had to do that kept the art valuable and kept you in the mainstream, in the know, whatever. You created this resume. You did exhibitions that were of a certain importance, and you never changed from that. And even before coronavirus, I felt like the art world was starting to change a little bit. Now I think it's changed a great deal. So, like, I wouldn't think twice about creating prints to put out for somebody now. I think, and before that would have been very looked down upon within the industry. But I think now the art market's going to be very different. You keep seeing all of the news is about the huge galleries like Zorner and Gagosian and then about Mocha and the auction market. But the auction market really is about the 1% of the 1% of actual working artists. It's really more about blue chip artists and has nothing to do with the everyday working artist who makes a living by selling a $10,000-$20,000 painting or a $600 painting, whatever it is. And I think now artists have the ability to experiment with creating what the new art world is going to be. And I think that the slate's kind of wiped clean, because all those things that were so looked down upon before, I don't think they're relevant anymore. I don't think they can be relevant, because if they stay relevant, 90% of the artists won't have a job this time next year. So for me, I find it much more freeing, because I just don't feel like I have to answer to anybody. I feel like, the things that I created last year with my resume put me in a place where I can do more what I want to do and create what I want to do and be very true to what my vision of my art is. I've been a painter ever since I started, and painting's kind of been passé. It wasn't important. And now I feel like maybe that's changing. And even if it doesn't, this is what I like to do and what I am good at. And this has allowed me to open that up a bit. That was a very long answer.
No, it's very well said, and you really answered it, I think, completely, fully, and without a doubt. I have another question for you from Anonymous. How much of you is in your work?
Oh, I think all of my work is me for the most part. And if it's not, that means I've missed the mark. And then typically it stays in my studio, and I will continue to tweak it, or even sometimes completely repaint it. But now what I'm doing is I bring well, I've always done this, but now I bring the work home, like the piece behind me, and it sits in my house, and I study what I did and the things I like and the things that I don't think quite were as strong as they should be. And I work on different things like that now. But it's always, abstract is an emotional response to what I see in the world for me. And, my work right now is about trying to create, not control what's going on, because I think losing the lines, I realize I can't control too much. But the color is about the emotions that are there and how I see everything that's happening in the world right now. Like this particular piece behind me, I wanted to try and get a very matte finish that was very ethereal and thin and kind of glowing. And what I did was I took my oil paints and soaked them in turpentine for weeks, which allows all of the oil that's the binder in the paint to come out. And then that gives you a very, very matte finish. And so that's how I created this work. And then I went back over it and I used Gamsol Gamvar, which is a type of varnish to protect them then. So that's like this is a very difficult piece for me to photograph because it's a little hazy.
Yeah.
But the color is magnificent.
I have another question for you, and I think this will be our last question. This is coming in from Roz. What do you, Todd, want to say to collectors out there who may be listening to you?
Well, collectors have never been more important to the survival of the arts than they are right now. And I think that, I had a collector of mine in London call me last week, and he spent all this time at home, and he was getting ready to redo his house there. And he said, now I want to create a chapel on my space. I've got a barn that we're going to transfer to a gallery, and he wants me to come in and work with him and his architect over the coming months to create a reflective space based around the art. And then for him, he also has used this time like I have, where he's been researching all these different artists that he likes, who they are, why they do what they do, just so he truly understands the art that he likes and why. And then as he creates this new chapel space, he wants it to be nothing except stuff he really, really appreciates and things that move him.
Incredible.
Answer.
No, you have. I mean, I do know that having known you for so long, you're very close and personal to your collectors. In fact, if you're not, your friends is not a strong enough word for the bond you have with many of them. So I can definitely see it's hard to just buy one. And I could definitely see him, especially after Venice. Um, I never imagined you as a religious artist, but the work was just brilliant and processional. And seeing the work at the MAC in Singen, Germany, I can definitely see him wanting to put you in his chapel, at home. So,
Well, and like a chapel about being spiritual or religious. A chapel a lot of times is about being reflective, and a chapel like for Rothko, the Rothko Chapel was supposed to be a space where you could go in and reflect on how you saw the world and yourself. There was a chapel created by Bellotti in Italy a few years ago, and it was Jenny Saville, David Sally, and Damien Hirst. And this chapel, he wanted nothing religious in there. He wanted it to be contemplative, but they used religious iconography in order to do it. So, like David Sally used the Sistine Chapel, and then did his style. Jenny Saville, rather, she used the idea of death as her contemplative mission statement, and she does very harsh images. And there was one in particular of a girl with cataract, a beautiful young girl with cataracts who had slit her wrist, and the blood was draining onto the floor, and this painting was like 12 feet high. So you went from one extreme to the other. And then Damien Hirst had used color, just pure color, to represent the four gospels. And I thought it was a brilliant room.
yeah.
And it was the Bellotti Chapel. And that was, I think, about 15 years ago, maybe.
Wow. I missed it. Well, on that note, thank you very much, Todd. I appreciate it. It was a wonderful inaugural conversation for Galstian Advisory. We have another one scheduled for tomorrow. The link will be on social media shortly and on my website as well. Thank you again, Todd, and have a wonderful weekend. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
Enjoy. Be safe.